The story opens on a rainy evening at a bus terminal in Denver, where the atmosphere itself mirrors the heaviness carried by the two protagonists. The bus terminal is not glamorous, flickering fluorescent lights, a mix of travelers with tired faces, luggage that looks too heavy, and a constant undertone of rain drumming against the wide glass windows. It feels like a place of transition, neither beginning nor end, but a pause between destinations, a perfect stage for two characters who themselves are caught between where they've come from and where they hope to go. Ava Martinez, 27, arrives clutching a worn leather bag, her phone buzzing with unanswered calls from her fiancé, whose controlling tone lingers in her mind. She looks polished yet restless, her professional life as a graphic designer offering little freedom compared to the constraints of her personal life. On the other side, Ethan Brooks, 29, lingers with a duffel bag slung across his shoulder, carrying the invisible weight of shame, not just from a broken engagement but also from the crumbling trust of his family after a bitter lawsuit. When they spot the last open seat on the crowded bus, both move toward it, colliding in a rush that sparks sharp words and defensive glares. Their first exchange is not warm but charged, layered with the frustration each carries, turning a simple scramble for space into a clash of two restless souls desperate for escape. What begins as annoyance quickly becomes unavoidable connection. The storm outside worsens, and somewhere in the empty stretch of highway the bus breaks down. Stranded passengers shuffle in their seats, groaning about the delay, while Ava and Ethan, awkwardly pressed near each other, are forced into the uneasy silence of proximity. At first, they avoid eye contact, each hiding behind the glow of their phones, but slowly, cracks in their guardedness appear. Ava notices the way Ethan rubs his left hand nervously, as though haunted by something unspoken, while Ethan catches the way Ava stares too long at her engagement ring, her expression a mixture of fear and resentment. Their annoyance begins to soften, not into friendship yet, but into curiosity. Small remarks slip out, sarcastic comments about the useless bus driver, shared complaints about the endless rain, and slowly those remarks stretch into fragments of real conversation. The storm outside feels symbolic, pressing them into this fragile bubble where the only choice is to talk. Their walls, though high, begin to show their first cracks. The forced proximity on a broken-down bus becomes less about inconvenience and more about two strangers recognizing the weight the other carries, even if they don't yet understand it. It is during one of these hushed conversations, long after most passengers have drifted into restless sleep, that the heart of the opening hook emerges. Ava, her voice almost trembling, admits something that feels rawer than anything she has ever said aloud: "I don't even know where home is anymore." Maybe nowhere. The confession is more than simple words, it is a quiet collapse of her defenses, a truth too heavy to keep locked inside. Ethan, leaning back against the window, feels the statement settle into him like an echo of his own struggles. For a moment, he doesn't respond, because he knows the weight of not belonging, of being untethered. Finally, he offers a reply that is equal parts hope and challenge, or maybe everywhere, if you're brave enough. It is not a flirtation, nor a rehearsed line, but a genuine reflection of his own fractured search for meaning. This brief exchange becomes the emotional anchor of their connection. In just a few words, both characters reveal what they are running from: Ava from the suffocating grip of expectation and control, Ethan from betrayal and loss. The audience, hearing this, immediately senses that this story is not merely about travel or coincidence, but about two people who might, through each other, rediscover what home could mean. This simple yet profound moment hooks the reader, inviting them to follow Ava and Ethan's journey not just across physical miles, but through the emotional landscapes of fear, healing, and unexpected connection. Ava Martinez's life has always been shaped by the unyielding expectations of others. Growing up in a strict household where decisions were made for her rather than with her, she learned early to suppress her own desires in order to maintain peace. Her parents valued stability above all else, measuring success in terms of financial security and appearances. It is this mindset that led her into an engagement with Daniel, a man who fits their vision perfectly: polished, ambitious, and controlling. To outsiders, Daniel seems like the ideal partner: reliable, career-driven, a provider. But beneath the surface, Ava feels suffocated. Daniel treats her less like a partner and more like a prized possession, someone to be molded into his vision of the perfect wife. Her opinions are dismissed, her individuality quietly chipped away, until she begins to feel invisible in her own life. Yet, when no one is watching, Ava pulls out her sketchbook, filling page after page with drawings of places she has never seen but yearns to: narrow cobblestone streets in Europe, sprawling deserts, bustling cities alive with color and chaos. These sketches become her only rebellion, a secret archive of dreams she has never voiced aloud. Now, sitting on a bus heading away from Daniel, she clutches her phone, watching as his unanswered texts pile up. Each message grows sharper, angrier, dripping with entitlement. Her thumb hovers over the screen, tempted to respond, but deep down, she knows she cannot give him the power to pull her back. For the first time in her life, Ava is no longer moving in the direction others chose for her, but she hasn't yet found the courage to choose where she truly belongs. Ethan Brooks's past carries the weight of both privilege and disillusionment. The son of a respected attorney, he grew up in an environment where reputation mattered above all else. His father's name opened doors, and with those doors came expectations. Ethan was destined for law school, for success, for carrying the family legacy forward. For a time, he played the role dutifully, burying himself in textbooks and courtroom observations, convincing himself that his path was chosen not for him but with him. That illusion shattered when he uncovered his father's darkest compromise, covering up a corporate fraud case in order to protect powerful clients. To Ethan, the revelation wasn't just about corruption, it was about betrayal, about realizing that the values he had been taught to uphold were nothing more than facades. When he chose to step away from law school, refusing to be part of the deception, his world collapsed. His fiancée, unwilling to tether herself to someone she branded a coward, walked away. His father, furious and disappointed, left him with nothing but silence. Since then, Ethan has drifted, untethered, wandering from city to city with only a duffel bag and a stack of unsent letters, each one written to his father, filled with words he cannot bring himself to send. On the bus, he pulls out scraps of paper, writes sentences that oscillate between anger and longing, then tears them into pieces before anyone can see. The act has become ritualistic, a way of wrestling with emotions too heavy to voice. Like Ava, Ethan is running, but unlike her, he doesn't yet know whether he is running from his father's shadow or toward a version of himself he has never. As the journey unfolds, the bus becomes less a vehicle and more a confessional, a moving liminal space where Ava and Ethan's guarded conversations begin to reveal the bruises beneath their exteriors. Their exchanges are not smooth or easy, they come in fragments, layered with hesitation and deflection. Ava, still tethered by her phone, scrolls through Daniel's increasingly aggressive texts, her expression betraying both fear and defiance. Ethan notices but does not pry, his silence is not indifference but respect, the first hint of the trust forming between them. In turn, Ava observes his strange habit of tearing up handwritten notes, watching the pieces flutter to the floor before he carefully hides them away. She doesn't ask about them directly, but in her sketchbook, she draws a figure with scraps of paper falling like rain, an unspoken acknowledgement of what she sees in him. Slowly, these small acts of witnessing, Ava noticing his brokenness without judgment, Ethan recognizing her suffocation without pressing, become the foundation for something fragile yet vital. They are two people who have spent years silenced by the demands of others, now beginning to hear echoes of themselves in each other's confessions. Their conversations remain guarded, but beneath the surface, seeds of trust are being planted, nurtured not by grand declarations but by the quiet relief of being seen. For Ava, Ethan's presence feels like proof that life could exist outside Daniel's grip. For Ethan, Ava's vulnerability feels like a reminder that his choices, however messy, were an act of courage rather than cowardice. Neither of them dares to name it yet, but something in their brokenness begins to align, setting the stage for a connection that will test, heal, and transform them both. The moment that shifts Ava and Ethan's journey begins not with drama, but with the inevitable sputter of an aging engine. Somewhere along the endless flat plains of Kansas, the bus shudders, coughs, and finally dies. The driver announces in a weary voice that the vehicle won't be repaired tonight, or ever. Passengers groan, some cursing, others phoning relatives or hunting for alternatives. For Ava and Ethan, the breakdown represents both inconvenience and opportunity. Stranded in a nowhere town with miles yet to cover, they make the uneasy decision to pool what little money they have and rent a car together. The plan is not born of trust but necessity, yet the act of handing over cash, of agreeing to share the burden, feels oddly intimate. As they climb into the rental, rain still streaking the windows, the silence between them deepens. That's when Ava's phone buzzes again. Daniel's name glows on the screen, his words sharp and possessive. "Where are you? Answer me." Ava hesitates, her fingers trembling, before rejecting the call. Moments later, another comes, this time with fury in his voice. Through the crackling speaker, Daniel hisses, "If you don't come back now, don't bother coming back at all." His ultimatum freezes her in place, her chest tightening, breath shallow. Ethan, gripping the steering wheel, doesn't pry or interrupt. He simply drives, eyes fixed on the wet road ahead, offering silence as a kind of shield. In that quiet, Ava realizes how foreign yet freeing it feels for someone not to demand, not to control, but simply to let her exist. The car becomes more than transport, it becomes her fragile sanctuary, a place where choice, however frightening, belongs to her. Hours later, hunger and fatigue drive them off the highway and into a small roadside diner glowing against the dark. The place smells of coffee and fried food, the kind of spot where strangers pass through unnoticed. Sitting across from Ethan in a cracked vinyl booth, Ava feels the weight of Daniel's voice still lodged in her chest, but here, surrounded by clattering dishes and murmured conversations, the tension eases enough for words to spill out. She pushes her untouched plate aside, staring at her hands, and admits what she has never dared to speak aloud: "I think I'm scared of freedom. Because if I fail, it's all on me." Her voice trembles, not from weakness but from the rawness of the confession. For years, her life has been controlled, scripted by others, and now the thought of making choices terrifies her more than Daniel's anger ever did. Ethan listens without interruption, his steady gaze grounding her. After a pause, he responds with a quiet conviction, "Then fail loud. At least it'll be your failure, not his control." His words strike something deep in her, not as encouragement alone, but as a permission slip she never knew she needed. The diner, ordinary and forgettable, becomes the setting of Ava's first honest step toward reclaiming herself. For Ethan, the moment is equally significant. In giving Ava permission to embrace failure, he also confronts his own fear of weakness, the shame that drove him from his father. Both feel the shift, subtle yet irreversible, a turning point where guarded conversation begins to transform into fragile trust. When they leave the diner, the Kansas night stretches wide and endless before them, the highway a ribbon of possibility. Standing by the car, with the scent of rain still lingering in the air, Ava and Ethan face the uncertainty of what comes next. Returning is not an option. Ava knows Daniel's words weren't an empty threat, and Ethan knows there is nothing for him back home but silence and resentment. So, in a moment that feels both reckless and liberating, they strike an unspoken pact. Ethan voices it first, leaning against the car with a faint, tired smile, until the money or the car runs out. Ava exhales, tension unraveling into something like relief, and replies, "No destinations. Just, forward." It is not a grand declaration but a fragile commitment to movement, to living without the weight of mapped-out futures or suffocating expectations. The agreement binds them, not with romance or promises, but with shared defiance against the lives they left behind. As they drive into the night, the headlights cutting through the dark, the car hums with something new, possibility. Ava sketches silently in her lap, her drawings now infused with hope rather than longing, while Ethan keeps his torn letters tucked away, the need to send them dimming with each passing mile. For the first time, both are not merely running from their pasts but daring, however cautiously, to run toward an undefined freedom. The inciting incident has done its work. Two strangers bound by circumstance are now partners in uncertainty, setting the stage for a journey that will test, challenge, and ultimately transform them both. The journey west unfolds like a patchwork of fleeting moments, an unglamorous road trip stitched together by abandoned towns, neon motel signs flickering against empty highways, and the endless hum of the engine. Ava and Ethan fall into a rhythm of shared silences and late-night talks, conversations that skate around their deepest wounds while inching closer to confessions neither dares to fully make. In diners, they laugh over greasy pancakes. In cheap motels, they trade stories of childhood rebellions whispered in the dark. Ava sketches landscapes they pass, fields of rusting tractors, ghost towns with peeling paint, and Ethan sometimes watches her pencil move, though he never says aloud how much life he sees in her art. Beneath the banter, attraction hums quietly, present but unspoken, as if naming it might shatter the fragile partnership they've built. Yet the world beyond the car window does not allow them peace. Daniel's presence seeps back into Ava's life, now sharper and more menacing. She begins receiving emails, not just pleading but threatening, written with a tone that makes her stomach twist. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel has hired a private investigator, tracking her steps with ruthless precision. At the same time, Ethan's past resurfaces when his phone rings with news he cannot ignore. The fraud case against his father has resurfaced, and his testimony could unravel everything. The weight of obligation, betrayal, and fear presses against him once more. Both Ava and Ethan are suddenly caught between fragile new beginnings and the relentless pull of unfinished battles, their small cocoon of freedom cracking under the pressure of the lives they tried to leave behind. The strain eventually surfaces, not in a dramatic explosion but in the quiet pressure cooker of the car, miles of silence finally snapping into words. Ava, exhausted by the emails and Daniel's looming shadow, turns on Ethan with a burst of frustration. "You're running just like I am. Pretending this road means freedom when it's just another escape." Her voice shakes, not with anger alone, but with fear that maybe everything she is building with him is just as fragile as the life she abandoned. Ethan, his jaw tight, fires back with a truth he knows will cut deep. "At least I'm not pretending my chains are love." The words land like a slap, raw and unfiltered. For Ava, the accusation pierces through layers of denial she has carried for years, that Daniel's control was not care, that her compliance was not loyalty, but chains she convinced herself were security. For Ethan, the statement is less about her and more about himself, a defense against the gnawing guilt that he too might just be hiding from the choices he refuses to face. The argument is not long, but its echo lingers heavy in the cramped space of the car. Neither speaks further, unwilling to bridge the chasm that has suddenly yawned open between them. Both know the other is right in ways they cannot yet admit, and that truth makes the silence that follows more painful than any shouted fight could have been. The car becomes a vessel of silence, every mile thick with unspoken words. The once comfortable quiet they shared now feels suffocating, like walls closing in. Ava stares out the window, the reflection of passing headlights flickering against her face, while Ethan keeps his hands rigid on the steering wheel, his knuckles white from the force of holding back. Each feels the pull toward the other, yet pride and fear hold them apart. For Ava, the silence is filled with echoes of Daniel's voice, reminding her of chains she hasn't fully broken. For Ethan, it is haunted by the voice of his father, the man he both wants to expose and longs to reconcile with. Their connection, once fragile but growing, now teeters on the edge of collapse. Yet within that silence, there is also a strange kind of clarity. Both realize that the bond they are forming cannot survive unless they confront not just their pursuers but themselves. The road stretches endlessly ahead, but instead of possibility, it now feels like a corridor narrowing with each passing mile. The tension between them is no longer external alone, it has taken root in the very heart of their partnership. The audience is left holding their breath, knowing that whether Ava and Ethan can bridge this rift will determine not only the course of their journey, but the possibility of freedom, healing, and connection they are both too afraid to admit they desperately want. The fragile freedom Ava and Ethan have built reaches its breaking point on the California coast. After days of traveling in tense silence, they check into a modest beachside motel, the kind with peeling paint and salt-worn balconies. The air smells of ocean and gasoline, but for Ava, it feels almost like a breath of peace. That peace shatters the moment Daniel arrives. His voice cuts through the evening air before Ava even sees him, a sharp, furious echo of the man she has been trying to escape. He storms into the motel courtyard, eyes burning, his polished exterior twisted by rage. The confrontation escalates quickly. Daniel seizes Ava's arm with bruising force, his words hissing accusations of betrayal, humiliation, abandonment. For a moment, Ava freezes, her body reverting to years of conditioned obedience, but Ethan doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, pulling Daniel off her, shoving him back with a force born of desperation and anger. The scuffle draws attention, motel guests spilling out to watch, and in the chaos, police sirens cut through the night. Daniel, smooth even in fury, spins the story with chilling precision. Ava has been kidnapped, Ethan is dangerous, unstable. The officers, swayed by Daniel's composure and Ethan's disheveled state, place Ethan in handcuffs while Ava watches in shock. Her sanctuary collapses in seconds, Ethan dragged away under flashing lights, Daniel's grip tightening around her life once again. The explosion point has arrived. Ava must decide whether to fall back into silence to protect Ethan, or to break the pattern that has defined her entire existence. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit police station, Ava sits between two versions of herself, the obedient fiancée who would fold under Daniel's demands, and the woman who has tasted freedom on the open road. Daniel's manipulation is slick, his words laced with half-truths that paint him as the concerned partner and Ethan as the aggressor. For years, Ava would have remained silent, allowing others to tell her story, but this time the weight of silence feels heavier than fear. She sees Ethan through the holding cell bars, his shoulders tense, his expression a mixture of shame and helplessness. He does not plead, does not beg her to act, but the quiet pride in his gaze reminds her of every conversation they shared, every moment he let her breathe without judgment. Summoning strength she never knew she had, Ava finally speaks. Her voice shakes at first, but as the words pour out, steadiness takes root. She tells the officers about the controlling messages, the threats, the tracking, the harassment. She shows them the string of emails, her phone filled with evidence of Daniel's obsession. Her confession is not polished, but it is raw and undeniable, the truth spoken without filters for the first time. The officers exchange wary glances, their initial assumptions unraveling as Ava's testimony reframes the entire situation. For the first time in her life, she reclaims her voice not as a whisper in a sketchbook, but as a weapon in her own defense. The choice has been made, she will not return to Daniel, and she will not sacrifice Ethan to protect her chains. The aftermath is not neat, but it is transformative. Daniel, his facade cracking under scrutiny, finds his charm met with suspicion rather than admiration. Ava's words have tipped the balance, and though the legal process is only beginning, the immediate outcome shifts sharply. Ethan is released, shaken but free, his name cleared enough for now by Ava's courage. When he steps out of the holding cell, there is no triumphant embrace, no cinematic kiss, only the quiet exchange of a look that says everything. Ethan, once her shield, now stands humbled by her strength. Ava, who spent years believing freedom was too terrifying to hold, now feels its weight in her chest, heavy but hers. Daniel, fuming on the other side of the room, realizes for the first time that his grip on her has slipped, that the chains he forged are breaking link by link. The twist is not just in Ethan's release, but in the reversal of power. Ava is no longer the one being spoken for. She has become the one who defines the narrative. Outside, the coastal night feels different. The ocean, once distant background noise, now roars like applause in her ears. Ethan walks beside her, still unsteady, but for the first time it is not him leading, it is Ava. The climax leaves them scarred but altered, their fragile bond tempered in fire. The road ahead is uncertain, but what has changed forever is this: Ava has chosen herself, and in doing so, she has chosen a freedom no one can take back. The morning after the storm of Daniel's confrontation, Ava sits on the edge of a motel bed, the phone heavy in her hand. For years, calling her parents meant surrendering to their expectations, bracing for judgment disguised as love. But this time, her voice is steady. When her mother answers, sharp with worry and accusation, Ava speaks before they can begin the familiar cycle of persuasion: "I'm not marrying Daniel. This is my choice, not yours." The words flow with surprising calm, not shouted but resolute, each syllable a brick in the wall she is finally building for herself. She doesn't defend, doesn't justify, she simply declares. When her father's voice rises in the background, demanding explanation, she exhales and ends the call. The silence that follows is terrifying and liberating all at once. For the first time, Ava does not tremble at the thought of disappointing them. She looks down at her sketchbook, pages filled with dreams she once kept hidden, and realizes they are no longer secret rebellions, they are possibilities. The act of hanging up is not just defiance, it is her first true step into freedom. The past, with all its chains, is still there, but she has finally learned she can walk away. The motel room feels brighter, lighter, as though the act of reclaiming her voice has shifted the air itself. Ethan's resolution comes not in a burst of emotion but in quiet acceptance of what he has always known he must do. Sitting outside beneath a California sky streaked with fading sunlight, he dials his attorney. His voice is low but firm as he says the words he has dreaded: he will testify against his father. He knows what it means, an irreparable fracture in a family bound more by reputation than love. He imagines the disappointment in his father's eyes, the echo of words that once called him a coward. But for the first time, the weight of those judgments doesn't bend him. Ava's courage has seeped into his bones, showing him that silence is its own prison. As he hangs up, Ethan feels both hollow and lighter, as though he has set down a burden too heavy to carry alone. The corruption he uncovered will finally face daylight, even if it costs him the last threads of connection to his family name. When he walks back into the motel room, he doesn't announce his decision with grandiosity. He simply sits beside Ava, their shoulders brushing, and lets the quiet say what words cannot, that in choosing truth over comfort, he has finally chosen himself. His story, once shaped by his father's shadow, is now his own, even if it comes at the cost of blood ties. For Ethan, empowerment is not about winning but about refusing to run any longer. That night, the two of them drive once more, the road unfurling beneath headlights, the hum of tires filling the spaces where words are hard to find. They stop at a small overlook by the ocean, sitting on the hood of the car while the waves crash against the shore below. No grand gestures pass between them, no fiery declarations. Instead, the intimacy is quiet, steady, grounded in what they've endured together. Ava turns to Ethan, her expression soft but certain. "You don't fix me, Ethan. But you make me brave enough to fix myself." Her words are not a confession of dependence but of strength, an acknowledgement that what binds them is not rescue but recognition. Ethan, his chest tightening with relief, replies with nothing more than a small nod, his eyes glinting with something unspoken but understood. They don't need promises of forever, only the shared knowledge that, for now, the road ahead is theirs to define. The air between them is charged, not with fire but with the kind of warmth that lasts beyond the moment. As dawn begins to break, Ava sketches the horizon, capturing the first light spilling across the ocean. Ethan watches, not as a savior but as a partner. Their journey is unfinished, uncertain, but the resolution lies not in reaching a destination, but in the fact that both now walk it on their own terms. Together, yet whole. The empowerment arc closes not with fireworks, but with the steady, profound realization that freedom is no longer a dream, it is their reality, fragile but fiercely theirs. Months have passed since the chaos of motel lights, police stations, and breaking chains. Life has softened into something steadier, not perfect, but real. Ava now spends her mornings in a small cafe overlooking the ocean, sketchbook always open in front of her. She fills the pages with portraits of travelers who pass through, backpackers chasing sunsets, families sticky with ice cream, surfers with salt in their hair. Each sketch is a reminder that lives can be rewritten, and hers is still unfolding. She no longer flinches when her phone buzzes. Daniel is nothing but a ghost, his threats silenced by distance and her own resolve. Just down the boardwalk, Ethan has carved out a life that mirrors his search for simplicity, a modest surf rental shop, boards leaning against weathered wood, sand dusting the doorway. He teaches tourists how to balance on the waves, his laughter carrying over the sound of the tide. They are not bound by labels, not defined by traditional roles. Instead, they orbit each other in a rhythm that feels free, sharing breakfasts when the timing is right, walking the beach at dusk without promises or expectations. Their connection is no longer about survival but about choice. For Ava, this life is not an ending, but the beginning of a freedom she once feared and now claims with both hands. One quiet afternoon, Ava seals an envelope with trembling but steady hands. Inside lies her old engagement ring, once a gleaming symbol of control, now nothing more than a reminder of the cage she escaped. Alongside it, she tucks a small handwritten note, "May this never be anyone's cage again." The words are simple, but they carry the weight of her transformation. She addresses the envelope to a women's shelter, a place where the ring might be melted, sold, or repurposed into something that gives life rather than steals it. As she drops it into the mailbox outside the cafe, her chest expands with a relief that feels like exhaling after years of holding her breath. The gesture is not about erasing the past, but about reclaiming it, turning something that once represented chains into a tool for someone else's freedom.